Let us complete the other part of the analysis of paper 2. We are basically trying to find out or develop a template, find a strategy for all of you to understand what would be the expected question, and then obviously we'll talk about in one small session how do we write those answers. Fine. So if it is audible, let me know so that I can start. Is it audible? Fine. Okay, audible. Right. So let us start with where we left, right? We were talking about the constitutional philosophy part or the values, fine, and the union government. Fine. So we have already talked about how this part can be asked. Fine. Apart from this, there are certain areas, right, which are again very important, especially related to the constitution and constitutionalism. Fine. Every time you can expect a question here. Constitutionalism, constitution, the elements of constitutionalism in Indian constitution. Fine, obviously such questions are very abstract in nature, right? Constitutionalism is the basis of good governance. Fine. Constitutionalism enforces ethics in governance. Fine. What are the elements of constitutionalism in Indian constitution? Right? Are we seeing the evolution of the constitutionalism in Indian constitution? So are we experiencing this evolution? Now see, constitutionalism, as you all know, obviously is a philosophy or philosophical basis of the idea that there is a limited government, right? Limited government obviously means that the government has power and authority, but it cannot use or this power and authority without the restriction or the accountability. So if you use this idea, right, this idea is quite similar to the concept of administrative law. Or at least one aspect of the constitutionalism is visible in terms of administrative law. Right? Wilson's definition. Every detailed and systematic execution of law is public administration, right? So Wilson was trying to bring legal perspective. What does legal perspective mean? That obviously the primary purpose of public administration is what? To somewhere implement the laws, right, and follow the rule of law, right, as developed into what you can say a prescribed procedure or format by the government, right? That is the idea. Fine. So this constitutionalism and administrative law can be one idea which can be clubbed together, right? Then constitutionalism as the basis of bureaucracy, right? As we study something called political and administrative culture. So bureaucracy as the basis of, or constitutional as the basis of bureaucracy, right? What does it mean? It obviously means it is talking about the administrative law, right? Administrative law, one of the primary focus of administrative law is the constraint or restriction on the bureaucratic power or authority, So this idea easily translates into the control or bureaucracy's primary, the idea behind the bureaucracy is the control of over bureaucracy of a defined legal system, right, under which it operates. So there is a limit of jurisdiction, there is a career system, there are defined parameters in which it works, and obviously the bureaucracy was not intended ever to bypass or overrun this defined boundary, right? So that is the idea, and you cannot think of bureaucracy as a system which has absolute power, which has immense power. In fact, bureaucracy is treated as an instrument. So this instrumental view of bureaucracy is also one of the facets of constitutionalism, right? That it is only a means and it is not an institution in itself. Fine. So now see, this also can be asked, right? Judgments can be asked, for example, Supreme Court's, right, view regarding the civil servants, right, or high courts basically denying, not denying exactly, but yes, they are reducing the entertainment of the or entertaining the service issues, right, service condition issues, and mostly directing them to CAT and SAT, right. It is basically why, because somewhere this, the bureaucratic abuse of power, or for that matter, the government's, any kind of, a conflict with the bureaucracy, right, has to be dealt with a specialized system, and that is why this specialized system was created. So if they are going to the courts, then it is undermining the entire purpose of the administrative law, right? That is the reason why these institutions have emerged. So various facets of constitutionalism, right, may include one, the theoretical aspect of the nature of bureaucracy, the restriction on the bureaucracy, right? Judicial restraint over the use of bureaucratic power, either through PIL or judicial review or Article 32 to 26, right? Or there are various other cases, right? Madras Bar Association case, then L. Chandrakumar case, right? Even ADM Jabalpur case can be cited as, where the bureaucratic power was somewhere enhanced. Fine. Ultimately, it was overcome, right, in the later judgments. So you can use these ideas to somewhere convey that the constitutionalism is the core of the bureaucracy. Fine. As far as in general questions are concerned about, role of judiciary in enforcing constitutionalism, uh, the recent issues or recent controversies that have emerged between judiciary and executive, or judicial activism and constitutionalism. So that can also be one area which can be asked, right? Obviously, for that, there is a lot of content, fine, but we'll talk about how do we frame the answer, don't worry. So let's first look at the ideas. So this is also one important area. Then your political culture, fine, administrative culture, bureaucracy, democracy debate. Fine. So various aspects can be added here. One, obviously, when we say political culture, we should talk about the ecology of administration. So as public administration functions in a political context, right, it is obvious that the political culture has a dominant impact on administration. Fine, duly cited by people like Riggs or Heddy, fine, or Montgomery, fine, and even a lot of other scholars, as you know. So somewhere, even Weber, right, when Weber talks about the control over bureaucracy uh, through representative democracy, so he also somewhere defines that, okay, yes, the dominant ecology to make the administration accountable is the political system. Fine. So one aspect should come when you talk about political culture, ecology of public administration. Fine. Secondly, the ideology. The other aspect should be reflected in the answer, the ideology. What is the ideological perspective of a parliamentary democracy? right? Or even the presidential form, it doesn't matter. The general ideal is that there must be political control. Fine. So this also somewhere determines the administrative culture or the behavior of the administration that emerges over a period of time. Then your socio-cultural history. Right? All the systems that have somewhere come from the colonial system, right? Or we follow the ideals of communism or capitalism, right? Or many societies which are still governed by traditional value system. So they somewhere determine how the administrative system or its behavior will emerge over a period of time. Fine. Uh, then here, obviously, we can again, right, use certain theoretical aspects, like when you talk about again rigs, the impact of formation of cliques, right, polynormativism, right, polycommunalism, then ascription based administration, right? So the socio-cultural history also has a big impact, right? Obviously, the monarchies gave way to the transitional democracies, then to the full-fledged democracies. Industrial revolution was, impacting all this. So this you can highlight when you are confronted with a question related to this, right? Obviously, there are various models, right, or various frameworks to understand the political culture, right, especially contributed by scholars like Almond and Verba, fine, or even Heddy. And there are so many other scholars, but we are not borrowing the scholars from political science, right? We are taking basically the administrative scholars. Heddy, uh, even Peter Berger, Peter and Morrow, Berger. So they have, like Almond and Verba, and they have classified, right? You have political culture, which is parochial. So you have a parochial political culture, which is very narrow, conservative political culture. Fine. Then you have participant, right? Passive. So whether it is parochial or passive or participant, fine, or a kind of dependent political systems. So there are different classifications of political culture, right? One in which the people are merely dependent or used as the subjects. Subjects are exploited. There is an urge for dictatorial power in the government system, and the entire political culture is based on this idea that how we can suppress or coercively control the people, right? Passive type. Parochial is more narrow, where you are obviously providing certain things, certain utilities to the people, but in no way the people's views or opinions are accommodated, right? Even though they may be given certain platforms, but they will not be allowed to express it. Participant is the modern democracies that we see. Based on these classifications, Almond and Verba, as you know, they have defined the various kinds of administrative cultures. Right? Obviously, administrative culture, uh, to a large extent, depends upon the behavior of administration, right? And obviously, the perspective or the perception that society has. So these are two very important elements which are defining the administrative culture: behavior of people actually, or civil servants, and the perception people have according to how they act with the citizens. This behavior is shaped by two factors: informal, right, and formal. Formal is your legal rational system that defines it. Informal again are the attributes that are impacted by the socio-cultural, right, political elements. These are more ecological impacts. Fine. So this is more of systems impact. This is more of ecology's impact, right? Perception again is based on two aspects. One is normative perception, fine, and one is utilitarian or utility perception. That means people feel that administration is performing the tasks and they are able to get things done by the administration. So they feel good about it, obviously. Normative is obviously in general what values the society cherishes or desires and what values are depicted by the administration. So we say we want honesty, right? We want proactiveness, we want sensitivity, but they are not, right? So there will be a normative benchmark, a value-based benchmark, subjective benchmark on which the society will evaluate the administration. Fine, and here a lot of issues emerge, right? Corruption is one of the perceptions, and not necessarily perceptions, right? It is one of the undermining of the values uh, of the legal rational system or rule of law system or democratic philosophy on which we develop the system. So people value these things, right? Whereas the administration might be willing to, eliminate those values. So they will develop a kind of perception. Fine. Based on this, the administrative cultures have been classified. If you know, most of you might be knowing it, obviously, as we have something called a classic administrative culture. Fine. Mostly France and Germany. This is continental type. Fine. Here, obviously, there is a very important perception. This is called the Francophone, right, or French Germanic tradition. Here, the basic belief is that administration is to be treated autonomously. Administration is a superior system in the society, and administration is committed or it is working for the society. So, this is called an organic view. Organic view of society. That means people do not, or the system does not distinguish much between the people or society and the administration. It believes that society welfare and interest is the commitment of the public administration. So there does not seem to be a contradiction between the administration's intention and objective and society's intention and objective, right? And that is why they are given autonomy. They are treated almost as the fourth branch of the government. Fine. Whereas now there is another called the participant civic culture. The participant civic culture is more concerned with the public opinion. Fine. Here the center is not administration, but people. Public opinion is the center. And the popular belief is that there must be a strong control over administration. Here it is autonomy, but here it is strong control, right? It is also called the culture of administrative constraint, as used by Nicholas Engel. Fine. So your US, UK, and many democratic countries can be brought. Even India can be said to be like this. And then you have modern or modernizing adaptive system, basically used for Japan, right? Because Japan had been now emerging from a monarchical system into a more democratic, or you can say a symbolic monarchical system. So the nature of civil services in Japan evolved almost like that, right? The only difference was that it was coming from an elite or monarchical mindset. So they had tried to eliminate the elitism from the Japanese civil services system. And that is why I said it is modernizing adaptive. That means it is somewhere in the transition from a traditional monarchical dominant administrative system to more democratic system. Fine. So Japan and many countries in the world today can be classified into this one, right? Many of them are emerging into, like Bhutan, right? We knew monarchical, but 2008-9 onwards they started, experimenting with a monarchical democracy. Nepal, but they are obviously not exactly as Japan, but they can be. The fourth is obviously your communist systems. right? Communist systems, as you know, have something called party-state bureaucracy, right? And it's basically a politicized bureaucracy. This politicized bureaucracy also has its own utility, right? But in terms of theory, in terms of theoretical analysis, it is not considered to be a neutral or more effective bureaucracy, right? But in reality, it has nothing to do with efficiency. This may be more efficient in nature. Only ideologically or in the terms of value system, it is not good. Fine. So they also have, they have a very good model of circulation of elites. Right. Now, this is not actually exactly what it seems like. Right here, you can have someone at the top here, and then you can bring this person tomorrow at the lower level. So they have this model, right, where the civil services administrative positions or people occupying these positions, right, they are rotated in the system. Why they are rotated in the system? So that there is no elitism in the bureaucracy. Fine. So communist systems are designed in a different format. Fine. So it is quite obvious that, okay, there can be different forms of system. Ferrell Heady has also classified certain things, right? Like Cordillo systems. Cordillo systems are basically dictatorial, and African nations, Latin America, we find a lot of strongman system. So here there was a single person who had mobilized the entire power around himself, right? And basically uses military as a means to suppress and control the people. So there can be different forms of administrative cultures visible throughout the world, right? And obviously they are also somewhere related to the ecology in which those countries or those societies have emerged over a period of time. Right? So one type of question can come here. The similar question can be asked in your CPA as well, right? When we study impact of ecology on administrative systems, fine, same, almost similar content, fine. But as far as you're writing now paper to answer, so you have to bring some paper to perspective, like T.N. Chaturvedi's analysis. Right? The book he has written, Contemporary Administrative Culture. So he also classifies that there are different types of administrative behavior, right? Fence-sitters. Fine. Today we are witnessing what you can say not exactly the very strong bureaucracy, right? But we are witnessing that somewhere there is a very thin line between the political and bureaucratic relationship, right? Especially when one person becomes very powerful, right? Charismatic leaders emerge, and they generally use bureaucracy, like in UP, the CM, the way he is governing, right? Or even the PM, the way he is governing, or even to an extent, you can say the Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi, right? One person trying to control entire administration, and that was the conflict between the government and the LG, the famous case 2018. Fine. So you can say that, okay, there is a changing culture, no doubt, right? Social media has impacted this culture a lot, right? And right, for celebrity civil servants. Okay, that itself is becoming a big issue, right? So we are somewhere witnessing the emergence of bureaucratic populism, fine, or bureaucratic activism through social media, fine. So it is more like virtual activism, posting videos, getting likes, having subscribers, big influence, becoming influencers on YouTube and like that, right? So cultures are changing, but yes, on the other hand, we are focusing on the citizen-centric approach also. So don't miss this aspect also, citizen-centric approach. And this is where the importance of bureaucracy, democracy debate comes. Right? So if you're dealing with such questions, start with the theoretical idea, obviously how bureaucracy seems to be opposite to democracy, the value systems, the features, the basic premise, they are quite different. Rational, non-rational, right? Rules, regulation, procedures, rule of law, populism. Subordination, control, hierarchy, participation. Fine. Consensus-oriented, dissent allowed. Here, nothing. Unity of command, centralization. Fine. Means and ends are well defined. It is not well defined. Mostly related to ballot box democracy, right? We are mostly related to electoral politics only. Fine. So, right, politicization. Fine. Impact of bureaucracy, bureaucratization. Fine. So, a lot of difference. Right? Neutrality. Now, neutrality enforces the values of the democracy within the bureaucracy. Right? Obviously, democracy is pro people, is more active. Neutrality somewhere seems to be negative to that, but it is not true. Right? If bureaucracy is not neutral, it cannot serve everyone equally. So, equality, inclusion, justice, egalitarianism, whatever you say, is dependent upon neutrality, apolitical nature, right? Anonymity, whatever. Fine. So this debate you can start this way, and then you can write, okay, there are numerous examples that can be provided. Fine. So if you're delivering a policy or a scheme, if you're talking about minorities, vulnerables, obviously the bureaucracy's neutrality becomes one of the important uh, launch pads for the government's acceptability by various vulnerable sections. The policies can be inclusive only when there is neutrality. So neutrality as a culture or as a value system of bureaucracy is very important. Fine, but neutrality itself is changing now, right? We are more, like we said, we are talking about populism, activism, and all those things, right? So a lot of examples you can put here if you want, right? Community and bureaucracy. This is also changing the culture of bureaucracy, right? Again, RTI, numerous things you can write, digital era governance, and even NPM as an administrative reform model or NPS as a reform model, public value approach, right? They have modified the traditional culture into more modernizing culture, more public-centered culture in civil services. Fine. So these questions or these kind of questions will be asked from this. Fine. Otherwise, this chapter, I don't think much, except some judicial judgment has come, right? Questions regarding privacy can come. Then how fundamental right and DPSP need to be balanced, right, for overall governance, good governance, right? A question can also be asked as DPSP must somewhere influence the FR or should be at par with the FR to promote the good governance or ethics in governance, right? Welfare state needs to focus more on DPSP than fundamental right, and likewise. So they can ask these kind of questions. More or less, nature of answering will be same. Fine. Then you have this union government. Now see, if you take this part, club it with the state government. Fine. Logically with the district administration and collector. If you read it together, it will make more sense to you. Fine. Union government and administration, state government, district administration, collector together. Right. That is how you should write the answers also. Fine. So the nature of questions here, as you know, fine, can be very simple. Okay, regarding the union government administrative structure. One. Fine. How the nature of ministries, departments, fine, changing. Do we need reforms in departments and ministry, right? How the administrative structure of the government can be reformed, right? A discussion regarding the various important administrative organizations like PMO, Cabinet Secretariat, Central Secretariat, fine, or your offices like NSA, right? And likewise, obviously, you know the use of ED, CBI, right? Revenue intelligence, DRI, and likewise. So they are also very important uh, with respect to current developments that have taken place, right? Uh, what is the role of these institutions, right? How central government or government has control or government influences the administrative institutions, right? Or it is making these administrative institutions more meaningless, whatever. So there can be one type of questions on this, right? What is the nature of functioning of these institutions and how their relationship is changing, right? As you know, dominantly PMO is becoming more influential than Cabinet Secretariat, right? In fact, the PMO has usurped certain functions, right? With the Niti Aayog, the restructuring which has taken place, right? We have more experts now in the Niti Aayog. So obviously, Niti Aayog is becoming more technocentric, right? Technocratic organization, no doubt. But because Niti Aayog is directly correlating with the PMO, okay, many of these schemes or deliberations on the scheme is being done through the PMO and Niti Aayog. So it is quite obvious that a lot of developmental or reform initiatives are basically controlled by a body, right, or administrative body, bureaucratic body. Both the phenomena are visible, as you can see. Riggs uses the word politicization of bureaucracy, right, and bureaucratic politics. So demonetization, implementation of GST, or certain changes which have been witnessed in Delhi, governance of Delhi, right? How ex-bureaucrats are becoming the governors and lieutenant governors. That is quite obvious. So that is also an element of bureaucratic politics, right? Increasing influence of civil servants in policy making. Okay, and that is quite obvious. We already had uh, GOMs, group of ministers, EGOMs, right? Now we have IGOMs, right? Or various coordination committees, right? Group of secretaries, committee of secretaries, and likewise. So they are playing a very active role, and they need to play, right? But their primary role earlier was coordination, interdepartmental coordination, right? Interorganizational coordination. Now their dominant role is in influencing the cabinet decisions. Fine. So how, there are a lot of decisions which have been taken, right? For example, scrapping the tribunals. So Finance Act scrapping a lot of tribunals, fine, which were supposed to be useless, right? That is purely a bureaucratic decision. Uh, then undermining the powers of the CIC, right? Increasing power of the Home Secretary over various functions. Dominant role of the Finance Secretary in terms of budgeting process. It should be, no doubt. But then Minister of Finance should have a dominant role, whereas PMO and Finance Secretary have a dominant relationship. Fine. So you can think of questions on these lines first. Fine. Secondly, obviously, the questions can be on union state relations. These are very traditional questions. These are also asked. Fine. Especially when you say union state relations. Now, what is the nature of question that can be asked? Fine. One can be union state political relations. Fine. So questions here, PM, C, right? PM, governor, C. This is always controversial and it will be asked. Fine. Some form or the other. Right? Tamil Nadu governor, right? Related to the betting issue, if you know online gambling, right? How that he acted, he removes certain ministers also, which was obviously not in his power. So there can be a question on the relationship that governor, right? West Bengal, you have seen. So governor, how it is, or the role of the governors, how it is changing the center-state relation in India. Right? Also, question can be on the governor's doctrine of pleasure. Fine. Definitely, you have to use the Sarkaria Commission recommendations, right? SR Bommai case, right? Or various recent judgments are there. Fine. Delhi government case, then Punchi Commission recommendations. Fine. The constitutional premise of the doctrine of pleasure, then Supreme Court's recent view. Fine. On governor's power of reserving the bill, the state bill for presidential consideration. Right, so court has already said that it cannot be arbitrary. Right, it cannot be immune from judicial review. Fine, and it cannot be without any parameters. Governor's personal satisfaction is not the basis. Right, his personal judgment and satisfaction is not the basis. There is a constitutional premise on which only he can do so. Fine. So question on center-state relation can be this. Fine. We have already talked about federalism. This can also be a question here. Fine. Changing nature of federalism in the aftermath of Niti Aayog. Usual question, demise of planning commission, and changing nature of center-state relation. How centrally sponsored schemes have impacted the center-state relations. Right? Again, increasing role of the central agencies. Right? ED, CBI, NCB, whatever, how that is changing or how that is going to impact the future of federalism in India. Fine. Then, let us say, another question can be more about the reducing the size of the union government. So this is also an important idea discussed by second ARC, size of the union government. Right? Because obviously we are witnessing the market-based governance. Fine. In that scenario, still we have a lot of ministries, right? Do we need Ministry of Union, Information and Broadcasting? What about Transportation Ministry or MORTH, as you know? Then recently created ministries, a lot of new ministries created. What is their rationality, right? Do we need to transform the department system, ministry system into agencies? Right? Does government need to create more independent regulatory commissions? Fine. Then likewise, you can have a lot of issues related to this. Then how legislative control, right, is declining or strengthened. Both the views can come, right? Especially Nari Vandan law or women reservation. So increasing percentage of women in parliament, will that be able to influence the quality of legislations? This is equally important for general studies as well, right? So will it impact the quality of legislations? Will it improve the legislative control over executive? Will it improve the quality of accountability of executive towards the legislature? So these are the ideas around which a lot of questions can be designed. Fine. Then obviously the different types of parliamentary control, right? Ethics committee बहुत news में थी, तो you can, right? Need for ethics committee, how to make ethics committee more powerful, right? It doesn't have actual teeth. Okay, or do we need to make the ethics committee or a process of evaluation or scrutiny under the ethics committee more participative, as happened with Mahua Moitra, right? Then your obviously MPs, freedom of speech and expression, right? Rahul Gandhi's fine qualification, disqualification, grounds for disqualification, as you know, right? 102, 105, 194. The articles that you can talk about, fine. 10th schedule, changes to the 10th schedule, Maharashtra. So see, there are a lot of issues that can be linked to the same idea. Fine, coalition politics, emerging trends. This basically is coming from the later chapters, later units, right? Administrative issues, current contemporary issues, right? But they can again be linked to the same topic, static topic also. So coalition politics, nature of coalition politics, changing trends of coalition politics, and how that is impacting the neutrality, or what you can say, the proactiveness of the members of parliament in protecting public interest. Fine. So this again, freedom of speech and expression related to the role of the MPs, right, in restoring the legislative or accountability of executive towards legislature, or restoring the basic philosophy of the representative democracy. Fine. So how MPs can play a very effective role in maintaining the representative democracy, how it can enforce the values of representative democracy, right? What powers or what changes need to be brought in the privileges and prerogative of the members of parliament, right? There is a need to dilute the 10th schedule. There's a need to strengthen 10th schedule. There's a need to, redefine the office of prophet. So a lot of questions. Generally your general studies knowledge will be more effective here, fine. But the way we'll write it, again, like I said, it will start with a theoretical idea and then it will move forward, fine. So these are various areas which can be covered here, right? Then judiciary. And that's a usual question. Can we have all India judicial services? Rationality. Fine. Do we need more expertise? Judiciary may be lateral entrance, but obviously, as you know, that we have restricted the entry into the judiciary. So lateral entry in judiciary may be one perspective, right? Specialization in judiciary, right? Then lack of judges, एक issue है. So how your recruitment or AIGS, right, or your collegium systems can be improved so that you can have better or quality of judges, you can have lobbying in judicial appointments and collegium. So there are a lot of issues which have emerged, corruption in judiciary. Right? The Chief Justice openly saying that, okay, in my lifetime, I have never been influenced. Okay, Vijay. So in lifetime, obviously, he has given the view that, okay, in his lifetime, he has not been influenced. That means somewhere there is an acceptance that there are influences which are impacting the judicial decisions. So how do we reduce this judicial corruption, right? How you can have, the use of ethics or code of ethics or code of conduct for judiciary. But again, the problem would be that if we are going to do all this, unless we have code of ethics, right, which is already there, but if we are going to enforce code of conduct or any other means, then we'll compromise the autonomy of the judiciary. So in America, for example, we have the concept of judges for life. So they generally don't retire, they die. So in Indian context also it can be done, but you see they are more developed. Judicial review process is quite developed. Scrutiny is very strong there. Lobbying and influences are quite less compared to what we have. So there, this model can work, but not in ours. Fine. So we can again recommend that, okay, yes, we can have certain changes, right? But at the same time, we should not compromise the autonomy. So always there will be a conflict between the autonomy of judiciary and the accountability of judiciary. Fine. So this will always be there, right? So self-restraint, right? Ethical codes or codes of conduct to be enforced by the judiciary on judiciary, right? Which is conflict of interest, but still self-enforcement can be a better model. Fine. So these issues have been quite in news depending upon various events that have happened in the past, right? So judicial accountability, judicial control, judicial activism, judicial review, these are very usual things. Fine. So do we need to enforce better parliamentary democracy? Do we need judicial restraint? Or to enforce better accountability in administration or, council of minister or executive? Do we need proactive legislature or do we need proactive judiciary? ये भी एक debate है, right? कोई standard answer नहीं है, but you have to think on these lines. So proactive judiciary versus proactive legislature. Right? So which is better? Legislative control is obviously better in a parliamentary democracy. Judiciary is obviously required to ensure the accountability and moral and ethical decisions. Fine, but this should be first and then this should be there. Right. Then if we take this together, state, right, and center, then you will see a lot of question related to financial relations. Fine. This area also you have to deal with, or you have to understand center-state financial relations. We have already talked about something like fiscal federalism, right? Cooperative federalism or whatever may change. Fine. Right. Here also how the center-state coordination can be improved. What are the various institutions for improving this center-state relations? Right, so you obviously have Niti Aayog, again, how it has impacted, right? Whether Planning Commission was more restrictive, this is much better, fine. Or you can say that how the nature of relationship can be improved in today's scenario. So your Finance Commission recommendations are very important, right? Then one nation, one election model. One nation, one election, simultaneous elections, or one nation, one tax. How GST has impacted this relationship, the role of GST Council. See, a lot of content is from your GS only. Only the idea you have to generate within public administration. So GST, the impact of GST Council, right? The constitutional status and constitutional role. Okay, reforms needed in council. Fine. So this can be one, right? Then changing nature of devolution. Okay, that is fiscal transfers from center to states. So what has been the role? How the new schemes, right? New development schemes, right? Their funding patterns, especially CSR, right? Budgetary support or GBS, additional central assistance. Now they are merging all this, not this one, sorry, but this they are trying to develop the various new modes of augmenting the resources of the states and especially the local governments. Right? So how subsequent finance commission's recommendation has changed the nature of financial relationships, financial transfers between between union and state and local government, how local governments are emerging as centers of development related to the financial devolution, right? How these trends have emerged, right? There's an increasing trend, but this has also led to something else. The union government is now diverting or creating a lot of cess and surcharge. As you know, this is not the part of the devolution. And because of this, major financial resource which should go to the states, right, or to the lower bodies, right, that is not going. So union is trying to, reduce the devolution by resorting to this. Fine. So you should also keep in mind this idea that how this can be improved. Obviously, we are trying to augment the local bodies' resources, but India is one of the countries where the overall devolution to the local government is much less compared to many countries of the world. Fine. So center-state financial relations, how this can be improved, how local body finances can be improved. This is also very important aspect. Fine. Like I said, role of governor, then PM-CM relations. Fine. Basically, this is union-state relations. So there are two ways to interpret it. One, where the government is of the same political party, right? Where the government is of different political party. Right? Certain states where there are more developmental issues, certain states where there are more regional issues. These regional issues are mostly political issues or socio-cultural issues. Assam, Northeast, UP, Bihar, West Bengal, Kerala, a lot of issues are there which are more political. So, right, this can also be interpreted that way. Find how a strong PM can have better relations with the state. How a constructive PM-CM relationship improves the overall governance. Fine. Then center, state, local relations. Fine. This also somewhere constitutes within the same idea. Right. Now this is the general, or these are the various dimensions in which you have to study or understand these perspectives or the current developments that have come. Right? Current developments you all study in general studies, they are more like events. Right? We are trying to interpret the events in terms of the syllabus or restructuring the syllabus in order to use that current perspective. Fine. Then, like I said, district administration to be linked here itself. Fine. It's not a very big topic. There's nothing here. And district collector. Right. So as the union, state, local relations change, how the district administration is changing. Right? How district administration is changing, right? Obviously, district administration is the basic territorial governance, right? Even functional governance. Right? So we can say district administration is a basic function performed by the government, and somewhere it is jointly performed by the union and state. Right? The people belong to All India Service, and they are obviously controlled by the state governments. That is also true. Plus, development is a scenario which is not purely the control of the state government. So, development has a dominant participation of local, union, state, all of the governments, right? But most of the developmental initiative is done at the district level, especially the role of collector or DA. Now here the nature of question changes. Fine. So how collector's role has changed or evolved, right, in post-independent India? How collector's role has changed in the LPG era? How collector's role has reformed, changed in the changing nature of federal relations? Fine. The importance of collector's role in the emergence of Panchayati Raj institutions. Right. Collector versus PRI, especially with respect to development. Right. Changing nature of district administration with respect to the changing nature of the role of Panchayati Raj institutions in planning. See? So local planning, district planning, and the nature of relationship between administration and Panchayati Raj institution. Right? Now see here, you have to take certain ideas in mind. Right? Whenever you're talking about changing nature of relations and its impact on district administration, on district collector. So district administration is a broad term, right? District collector is a broad term. Sorry, district administration is a broader term, and district collector is a short, narrow or conservative term. District collector mostly focuses on a particular position. Administration includes everything, right? Whereas when we use the word district government, fine, it will include both. If we use the word district governance, fine, it will include obviously the PRIs as well. With district administration, district collector, and many other institutions. Fine, MPs, MLAs, all of them. See. So how? Fine, sorry. How various initiatives which have been taken recently, right, where you talk about this yojana, that yojana, Swamitva yojana. So how they are impacting, right, the overall development scenario in district, right? So now the development process is more decentralized. Planning is decentralized. Financial devolution is not decentralized, it is still centralized. Use of finances to an extent decentralized, right? But financial monitoring and accountability again centralized. Resources at the local level centralized, because still they do not have much means of creating resources, though there can be several recommendations for doing that. Fine. But whenever you are thinking of writing this part, right, you have to include all of them together, right? You cannot write an answer without them. Fine. Then let us say the impact of globalization, right, on district collector, on district administration, on this relationship with the Panchayati Raj institutions. Questions related to, right, principle of subsidiarity, principle of solidarity. Fine. Then Like we said, globalization and its impact. Obviously, how globalization has impacted the local development. We have already talked about concepts like neo-localism, both positive and negative impacts. Fine, kindly talk about it. Local development should be people-led. Right? You need data, you need facts, you need examples, case studies, without which you cannot write all this. Fine. This is a dynamic aspect. This is not a static aspect that I tell you today, then tomorrow you'll use it. Fine. It's not like that. You have studied a lot of things over a period of time, right? Summarize that, use it. Right? What is important is how relevant that will be to your answer, whatever you're writing. Fine. Then obviously here we have to, somewhere bring the local development, Panchayati Raj, urbanization, all those units here also. So urban governance, right, which we'll take briefly into another topic, but urban governance, right, versus rural governance. How this is creating a challenge for district administration. Fine. Obviously, district administration, where you have, right, prominently rural areas, right, where you have prominently rural population or rural areas, the administrative style will be different. Problems, issues will be different. When it will change, fine, this will be different. Right? Because here you will have more transitional area. Here you will have less transitional area. Fine. Also, the impact of urbanization on rural areas is more slow. Fine. Here it may be very prominent here. Fine. So you can bring this aspect also when you are talking about, right, in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Himachal, right? There are various models which they are using, how they are integrating it. China, for example, the concept of rural townships. Fine. So how it has used the concept of growth poles, and it has utilized it, right? So this is one area which is also again important. Then usual questions like many times this has been asked, FRBM, right? How to improve the center-state financial relations. Do you think FRBM is an unnecessary control, right? What is your view regarding FRBM Act, right? And its impact on the state's fiscal scenario. Fine. So how the state's fiscal resources are being impacted with the implementation of FRBM, GST, and the pandemics like COVID. Right? So you have to bring this perspective. Without this, you cannot write. As you know, this is to rationalize the state's deficit or center and state's deficit. Fine. By focusing on fiscal deficit or budgetary deficit and revenue deficit. Fine. But then it is quite obvious that states, as development expenditure increases, the state's fiscal deficit will automatically increase. Right? How this is going to be overcome by the distribution or redistribution of resources. So devolution will increase in future as it is perceived. The CSS schemes might reduce, and they should reduce, no doubt. Niti Aayog has already recommended for it. Then the states, centers, ACA, additional central assistance to states should increase, right? ACA is way beyond the budgetary support or beyond the, finance commission support. So it can also increase, right? And there can be very component of grants basically should increase. component of loans should decrease. Fine, but this should be done keeping in mind the overall fiscal deficit of the union as well. Fine. So kindly look into this idea. Fine. So collector, then traditional questions, collector is the tortoise, collector is the center, collector is the, the cornerstone of the district administration, right? Obviously, you have to talk about functions of the collector, role of the collector, and how the importance of the collector still remains, fine? Whether it is land acquisition, industrial licensing, environmental impact assessment, or for that matter, conduct of elections, disaster management, right? These are all emerging areas, and obviously, in spite of having specialized institutions, right, we need a central coordinating system, right, or a node for coordinating all that. That is where collector comes into picture. Fine. A fine balance of authority, accountability, and efficiency all rolled into one, that is collector. Fine. Then your topic, another important topic is, right, planning, right, and PSC. Right, usual question है, but see, planning में generally the nature of question is how Niti Aayog is effective, what is the impact of Niti Aayog, how planning commission has been improved upon by Niti Aayog. There does not seem to be any difference between planning commission and Niti Aayog, right? Do we need to review? This was an issue recently raised by many of the MPs or certain political parties, especially Congress also, that we need to revive the planning commission. So should we need to revive planning commission? What are the weaknesses of the Niti Aayog, right, that probably were taken by planning commission? Planning commission, as various parties have highlighted, was pro-poor, fine, whereas Niti Aayog is not. Right, planning commission also goes well with the socialistic agenda that we have. Fine, so this also should be looked into, how we are going to use that, right? So we have moved ahead of Nehruvian socialism. Again, I have stressed again and again that without data, you cannot analyze these answers. Fine. So how Nehruvian socialism, how we are evolving in the context of globalization, how we are in the context of the emerging global economic scenario, how this Nehruvian socialism still is the philosophy of the governance in India. Fine, and likewise. So this then shift from perspective, long-term planning, right, to indicative, fine, to market-based. Right, planning is not just a technical activity. Right, planning has ideological components. Right, planning has a value-based perspective. Right, concept of micro planning. Fine. Concept of grassroots planning. What is grassroots planning? Same things. Fine. Then you have regional planning, planning and Panchayati Raj institutions, and role of DRDA, DPC, etc., or MPC in planning. Right? Do we need a more holistic body for planning at the district level? Fine. Should we decentralize planning to the block level? We already have Gram Sabha level planning, but we are missing the block planning. Why? Because generally the members of the block, right, they are generally not directly coming from the panchayats, and there are many models also for that. So generally there is a missing gap or missing link between the Gram Panchayat block and the district planning, right? So there's a lot of content on that. You can write it, but you have to think that how the local planning is impacting the overall development scenario. Fine, same thing. Fine, failure of planning or failure of centralized planning. Reasons for failure of centralized planning. Fine. Centralized planning promotes national planning. So there are two models, that national plan should be centralized or national plan should come from bottom-up approach. Right? So it should be top-down or bottom-up. Fine. Vijit, you can write, utilize it, but as of now, you just focus on what we are talking about. Fine. So you can use the content here, right? How planning impacted the GDP growth rate, what was the population growth rate, how per capita income changed, how the focus of the rural development programs modified from poverty alleviation to empowerment, right? From merely providing survival package, right, to more into what you can say new developmentalism, that is utilities, electricity, transport, roads, and all that thing. Fine. So how this nature of the focus, right, of rural development or development has changed, and that is why nature of planning should change, right? So the role of generalists versus specialist in planning or generalist plus specialist in planning, fine, all that you can discuss. Fine. Okay. Then PSU. Again, PSU is a very simple topic. Fine. The only difference is that many of you don't want to use that general studies into PubAt, right? You believe that okay, there is something else. There's nothing different. Fine. Public sector undertakings and Nehruvian socialism. Role of PSUs in development. Fine. Structure of PSUs. Right. Your classifications which are there. Right. How government is trying to classify the PSUs. What is the difference between different types of PSUs? Obviously, if you are getting the such questions and you have the option, don't write it because it's a useless question. Take a lot of time, right? So what is the profit ratio, right? What is the overall financial requirement to be classified as a particular type of Ratna, right? So all that is fine. So how PSUs have been restructured, that is important, right? What has been the disinvestment policy, right? How the ministry or the department has changed the nature of disinvestment, right? Do we need to do disinvestment in strategic PSUs, right? What are the various structures? Like I said, his structure here may also, the question may be focused on company form, fine, or basically the corporation form, fine. This is more legislative, statutory in nature. This is formed under a particular law, right? Or it can be in the form of joint ventures, joint enterprises, PSU, state PSU, central PSU, fine. Holding company, the model which is followed by SAIL, GAIL, right, and others, that there is an umbrella company and it manages most of the organizations in that sector, fine. So that is also one model, right? Then there are, as you know, hybrid on-witty models which are emerging basically for public-private partnerships, right? Your GS economics teacher or your general studies teacher would have given you a detail about it, right? Obviously, this is not the domain technically of PubAt, and it mostly is derived from the economics. But yes, when you study public-private partnerships, you can go into technical details. Though we need not write a lot of technical details here, we have to focus largely on how it is impacting the governance. So hybrid models, right? Or this, or how SPV is transforming this one. Reasons for failure of many PSUs, sick PSUs, right? BIFR, sorry. Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction, right? Impact of NCLT, likewise, right? There were controversy related to NCLT and Competition Commission of India. Right? Kindly look into that aspect also. Like I said, without data, you cannot. Right? So kindly look into that. Then your important theme, another theme is, like I said, is civil services. Right? Especially paper 1 and 2, both are interlinked. Personal administration, civil services, all together. Right? So the question can be on the classification, rank, position, and should we change India's rank system? Generalist dominated, should we change it? Right? Then lateral entry is an issue that can be tackled. Right? Do we need reservations, or should the purpose or welfare nature of the civil services, should it undermine the specialization that is coming through lateral entry? Right? So you can deal with this. Recently, as you know, issues related to sub-classification, right? Creamy layer. Fine. Again, this cannot be gauged today because we have just introduced it, right? Though it has been always used as one of the preferences. National Knowledge Commission was created, specialist dominated. Lot of specialists in Planning Commission also. It was also a technocratic organization, right? Special organizations created by the government, state and center, right, for providing or working as specialized staff agencies, advisory bodies. So we had a long tradition of lateral entry, though it may not be a direct lateral entry into civil services. So what is the basic issue, right? How recruitment should be modified, right? What percentage of people should be in the lateral entry? How do we assess their qualification, right? How they are going to collaborate with the existing civil services system? The people who are in the civil services system, how they can be, protected from the impacts that will happen because of lateral entry, right? Why lateral entry is necessary, right? To have competition with the civil services system. Generalist nature of civil services, career system, protection, lot of protection, constitutional protection. It creates a monopoly of the civil servant. So that is also one reason. Should we have a law for lateral entry? That means should we constitutionally mandate a law for lateral entry? That is also important, right? This lateral entry, as it has percolated to the states also, should it go to the local level? Local level should have its own force, employees, right? And there also lateral entry can be used, as it has been used in Sweden and many other countries, right? You can use that. Move ahead. Right. So this is also one area which is very important, especially when you say civil services. Your topic like administrative reforms is part of this one. Right. So, or this can be taken a bigger reform. This can be taken a smaller part of that. So administrative reforms area, right, especially influenced by second ARC. Right. So even a booklet is there. You can use that. That is a very good content, right? Simplified, straightforward, that can be written. So administrative reforms, recent reforms that have been taken, like I said, training, recruitment, right? Exam patterns, right? Within the system, Karmyogi, right? Reforms related to performance review, performance management system, performance assessment systems. Fine, this is also very important. Every year there's a 20-mark question on this, right? What is performance management system? How do we improve performance management in government, right? Obviously, the word performance management is more NPM dominated, right? Use of technology in performance evaluation. Fine. Let's club administrative reforms. Sub part of this is police reforms. Law and order, police administration. Fine. So one aspect of that is police reforms. Right. So as you highlight the general administrative problems, you put police into one category. That is more easy. Fine. So police reforms, again, similar issues. Community policing. Right. The West Bengal issue is basically a kind of implied consequence of community policing, right? The person who is supposed to be the culprit, right, was a volunteer as civil police. Fine. So this is again reform, then reforms, usual reforms in police that you know. Concept of smart policing, right? Predictive policing. Fine. Here you have to use a lot of judgments, right, or commissions, judgments, etc. Right, starting from the Dharamvira Commission, the first police reform, 1971, and even before that, under the British also, there were police reforms commission formed. But starting from that, the nature of the police reform is same; it doesn't change. Fine. So whether you take Raghavan, Padmanabhaiya, Prakash Singh case, any of these. Right? And now most of the states have went ahead with police reforms, right? But you have to bring again data here because per capita policing in India is quite less compared to the global average. Fine. Per million police is also much less in India, or per lakh police is much less in India compared to the other states. Fine. Police lacks specialization. Still, we are not focusing much on forensics. Right? If forensics improve, the conviction rate will increase. Fine. The burden on judiciary will decrease. The moment we have developed forensic or evidence evaluation, evidence gathering, fact gathering, charge sheet, right? That very moment these things will reduce, right? Then obviously people who are innocent, that can be saved from the repression or the exploitation of the system. More easy to do that. Fine. So we are not focusing much on this specialized techniques, use of technology, forensics, and all that. Right. Then we need reforms, jail reforms, prison reforms. Right. First, jail should be more of a correctional facility. The example can be given of Tihar, how Kiran Bedi, right? And there are many other jails, right? In India, there were certain examples where the prison heads have reformed the jails, right, to become more of reform facility than a punishment facility, right? But we have a problem what to do, that we are a system, we are an adversarial system, we want to punish people. So jail reforms, fine, especially upgradation of jails, right, finances, and obviously we can also link, there are judicial reforms related to bail, fine, related to under trials, fine. And because of that, right, we have a lot of jails which are full, or most of the jail capacity is full, right? Because of that, we are incurring a lot of financial burden. If we are able to resolve this part, prosecution, conviction, charge sheet, evidence, then we can improve this. Fine. So administrative reforms must be looked with or from that perspective, right? Obviously, administrative reforms are needed in constitutional bodies, right? We have Election Commission of India, right? We have UPSC. We have various other bodies you can write, fine. We have statutory bodies. Chief Information Commission, State Information Commission, Lokpal, fine, CVC, CBI. All of them are looking for reforms, fine. Obviously, nature of reforms is structural, right? Legal, that is procedural. Right? How to develop strong anti-corruption mechanism. And so when you think of administrative reforms, right, you bring this also into perspective, and majorly the reforms that we have initiated, especially related to Prevention of Corruption Act, role of CVC, right, CBI, state investigative agencies, anti-corruption agencies, right, and the Whistleblowers Protection Act, right, Lokpal, right, or as we call it, Ombudsman system. So this is also one area where usually one question of 15 marks, 10 marks, 15 marks, total 20 marks may be asked from this only. Reforms needed in constitutional bodies. Fine. Then there is an area called administrative issues, contemporary issues. Fine. Here, like I said, already we have talked about police reforms. That comes here mostly. Fine. But this is also very dynamic area. Here, questions related to coalition politics, right? Electoral reforms, right? Recently, as you know, electoral bonds. So, electoral funding will be one important area which you can think about. Fine. Then, regionalism in politics. This again will be a very important part. Fine, you see the emergence of a lot of regional parties. So how they are impacting the democratic politics, whether in terms of improving it or declining it. Fine, how national governments are susceptible to regional demands and regional influences. Especially when you see the performance of Samajwadi Party or TMC and likewise. So is it good or healthy or destructive trend for democracy? This part you have to keep in mind. It is both. Fine. Regionalism in politics is important because we are a diverse nation. We need contribution of or the voice of such people. Northeast has suffered primarily because of that. Fine. Then issues of human rights. Fine. Especially like I said, West Bengal case or UP, fine, or Rajasthan. Several, crimes have been committed recently, on and off, right? National Commission for Women, and making it a constitutional body, right? Or MHRC is a constitutional body, okay, which can give it more powers. So it is the need of the day. They should be made constitutional body. So human rights, National Commission for Women, NHRC, SHRC, right? Recent role. This is also very important. Here also you need data, facts, some current issues or current perspectives. Without this, you cannot write it. So data, facts, current perspectives, right? You can use NCRB data, right? National Crime Record Bureau data. Fine. So this is also an important issue, right? Crime against women, protection of women. Fine. Then impact of digital or digitalization. Fine. So one question you can always expect on cyber crimes or technology policy. Fine, especially related to digital era governance, IT Act. Right, privacy. These are all more or less the current general issues, right? They are not basically administrative issues, but they are governance issues, mostly that we read in paper 2 GS, right? So they are more or less regularly asked. Fine, impact of technology, rural governance, how rural governance can be improved through technology, right? Digital applications in rural governance, right? Swamitwa scheme, digitalization of land records, mapping through drones. We are using all that, right? So kindly utilize this idea. Fine. Then, obviously, like we said, reforms are related to anti-corruption. Fine. Issues of corruption, anti-corruption. Again, a lot of reforms which have been initiated here. How to redefine corruption, how to deal with corruption as an important issue. Is corruption a legal problem? Is corruption a social problem? Is corruption ethical issue? So a lot of dimensions can be explored here. Ethical है, legal है, social है, economic है. Right? So how to enforce ethics in governance, how to deal with this, fine, how in the era of globalization we are prone to corruption, right? As you know, financial corruption, economic offenses, right, or cyber crimes, they have become so prominent that it is impossible for one single agency to deal with all these crimes. Even CBI is not capable to deal with these crimes. Economic offenses wing is not capable to deal with these crimes. So somewhere, right, how do you create an ecosystem of cyber security, of strong anti-corruption agencies, of strong legal agencies, statutory bodies, citizens forums, involvement of various other specialized agencies, right? CERT, for example, right? Who can now combine together and tackle this. As you know, more than 20,000 crores in the last 4 years since pandemic, more than that even, right? That is just a record. So that has been, what you can say, somewhere taken away by the cyber criminals, right? So it is a big issue which government obviously is not taking into consideration as of now. Fine. So this is one area. Then definitely disaster management. Right, especially the structure. Right? Institutional structure, NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, right? State Disaster Management Authority, District Disaster Management Authority, Gram Panchayat or Panchayat Disaster Management Committee. So how disaster management can be improved, especially if you see, right, urban floods, right, congestion, the tragic death of the students. Fine, has been one of the reasons. One of the reasons for them is this, that there is lack of, right? We have not declared this urban flood or congestion as a public health problem. Right? What is a public health issue? That we should treat this as a problem, a health issue. We should treat this as a problem in crisis management. Right? So we have crisis management group or crisis management cells, right? But obviously people do not have any awareness about them. There are no direct helplines, right? Even if there are helplines, the availability of the resources is still very less. Why? Because we have never accepted this, that it is actually a big menace, a big problem in governance. So how do we include, right, such kind of urban issues, right, fire safety, or for that matter congestion, or for that matter urban floods, right, sewage treatment, cleaning, desalination, right, or whatever, desilting. All this is not defined properly under the Disaster Management Act. So National Disaster Management Act 2005 or Disaster Management Act adopted by the states, it should redefine the disaster, right, so that it can be included. Right. Now, if you see, most of the questions that will be designed will be around this. And contemporary perspectives mean, obviously, we are having a lot of content. We have second ARC content, we have magazines content. Obviously, what we have to do, we have to think on these lines, right? We have to restructure whatever the content we have studied or whatever we read in the newspaper every time we are reading it, right? We have to restructure your content into this, right? As far as you write answers in paper 2, without starting with theory, you should not write. Fine. Bring the theoretical perspective first, very briefly. Fine. Secondly, if possible, use data and facts, without which you may not score that much marks. If it is 10-marker question, if you use it, you might get 6. If you don't use it, you might get 4.5. So there's a difference. As far as bigger questions are concerned, right? Always, like I said, start with a theoretical basis. Fine. Some or the other theory will always be applicable. Secondly, you identify the issue, right? If a question is asked on local governance or performance management or corruption or disaster, right? Or e-governance or for that matter, planning or restructuring of PSUs, constitutional philosophy, British administration and impact, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? First thing, start with a basic premise, right? Use a statement or a statement by a scholar or some theory, start with that. Second aspect of the answer, in every answer that you write in paper 2, you should first explore the issues. So what is asked in the question, you take that particular issue, divide it into various dimensions, and that is your second part, or what you can say the body, the first paragraph of the body of the answer. Every question that you're writing, explore in that part the various dimensions of the issue which has been asked in the question, right? Without this, you cannot write a good answer. Fine, because you'll think, okay, I'll write on the way, I'll think and I'll write. Don't do that. So first identify various dimensions, right? So if it is corruption, identify definition of corruption. Okay, one part. Then prevention of corruption law, reforms in that. Fine. Corruption versus bribery. Okay. Fine. Then the prosecution under corruption laws. Fine. Fine. Nature of public corruption. Right. How it is reforming from coercive to collusive, right, to something, to deferred bribe to something, right, whatever. So you classify it first. That is the body, the first part of the body of the answer. Then now in the second part, you take up this one by one. That we need to redefine the corruption. So how do we need to redefine the corruption? This, right? Why? What is the reason? This is the reason. Right? Prevention of Corruption Act, right? The law talks about this. Right? The primary focus of the law is this point. What are anti-corruption agencies? These are anti-corruption agencies. So see, your answer has to be very well organized. So it is not paper 1. In paper 1, conceptual clarity is very important. Fine. In paper 2, detailing of the issue is very important. These are two different ways. So you can go for that. Then you should bring your facts, data, case study. Recently, the survey by this anti-corruption agency or the data from the NCRB talks about this. Fine. This becomes one of the primary ambitions of the law or the institutional reform that the government is pursuing. Second ARC has also talked about the similar reform. Fine. These are the 3 vital recommendations of the second ARC. Write it down. Right. Then conclude. How do you conclude? Obviously, when you make a conclusion, right, write it in more futuristic manner. Use the respected reforms which are being initiated now. So government's intention and its initiatives should be written in the conclusion always. that government is focusing on this sabka saath, sabka vikas, vishwas, whatever, right? Government is focusing on this, and its commitment is reflected in the certain schemes which it has undertaken. What are these schemes? These are these schemes, right? We hope, or let's hope, or let's assume that in future such schemes or such initiatives by the government would also incorporate these changes, right? These are going to increase, promote this, right? See, so scoring in paper 2 is much more easy. The problem is that you are confronted by the issue. Why? Because you have not analyzed the issue. Fine. Obviously, you cannot have every part of the syllabus, right? You cannot perfect every part of the syllabus. That cannot happen, right? But you can always perfect the idea behind it. So if you are using this model, this is going to work. Fine. For all those who are writing mains, we have already given certain important issues, right? If there is something else which would be needed, right, you still have time. Your exam is somewhere, I don't know, 29th or 30th. So you can still use that content. Fine. So anything that update will be needed, we'll give you. Right. Others can obviously use the content class handout, fine, second ARC booklet, and the newspaper they are reading, right? Already we are giving the Bridge magazine that has a lot of content. If you want, you can use it. It is very well structured. It is very well designed. Fine, use it in the perspective which I have talked about, right? So there will be no issue related to that paper also. Fine, the only thing is that you have to, right? Obviously, you have to develop the ideas and use the content which is available. Fine. You cannot simply verbally, discuss the idea and say, no, I've understood. No, you have to put that into black and white into paper. You have to make points of that. Fine. You have to keep adding something new to that. Don't overdo it. We don't need a lot of facts. We don't need a lot of schemes. We don't need you to write all these schemes when you're writing an answer. One, two, three data is enough. One scheme or two schemes are enough to analyze it, right? You can also write the answer by analyzing the scheme itself, right? Rather than using the scheme as an example, take up the scheme, analyze its components, and reuse that as an answer. Fine. So, all the best to you as of now. Fine. In case there are issues, obviously we will be there. But yes, first you complete your part of the bargain. Fine. Without that, you cannot simply keep asking something, right? Unless you put that effort, unless we see the commitment you have. Fine. So it is obviously, as we say, governance is multiple way, multi perspective analysis, right? Same way is the association between institutions and people, right? It is two-way, it is multi-way, right? If you don't put that effort, fine, we have already put more effort than probably we would have. So I expect you to now work on that. Fine, develop ideas, right? Streamline and filter those ideas. Uh, you improve your vocabulary. Right? You cannot simply expect to write good answer without having a good vocabulary. Right? Simplify it, make it lucid. It should be clear. Clear does not mean mediocre. Clear means clear, understandable. Fine. If you follow this, use diagrams, right? Illustrations. Like I said, I keep telling it every time. Fine. Write in paragraph and point form. Don't use only one model, right? Monotony within the answer writing is not required. So in some, you can write in points, or you can use a combination of paragraph and points and diagrams. That is better. Fine. Don't try to write in a very anarchic manner. Table यहाँ पे बना दिया, right? कुछ यहाँ पे लिख दिया. No need. This is the space, right? Follow the alignment of the space. If you find that space is less, but you have a lot of content, then try to be creative how to use that content, right? Don't unnecessarily fit everything into the answer. Nobody is ready to read that. Nobody is willing to read that, right? If you're conceptually good, right? If you have relevant issues, you have analyzed it. If you're able to interpret the impact of whatever is being asked, right, on justice, equality, welfare, governance, broad administrative implications, your answer is very good. Fine. So don't be in that myth, right? That you have to write something very extraordinary only then. It is not so. right? Judicial judgments, like I said, data, facts, this, they are important, but they are important to the extent they justify what you are writing. Fine. Sometimes question may be around them only. If a question is on privacy, obviously you have to write about the judgment. You have to take the judgment, previous judgments also. If it is about reforms in administration, take some committees and commission, not everyone. Fine. Unless they are specifically asking some committee. Fine. Kiran Agarwal pucha, write it, it's okay. But you should know that national training policy, right, 95 or 2012 and then 15, right, as implemented in 2015, it is the same logic which she is talking about, right? Nothing extraordinary in that. So if you have common sense also, you can write a lot of answers. Paul Appleby kya kehta hai? Use it at so many places, right? First ARC what it said, second ARC what it said, use it, right, in so many places, fine. So a lot of content you can get from the internet also, right? You need to just have an idea, fine. So don't worry, all the best to you for now. See you then. In case of doubts, obviously you can reach out to us. Fine. See you then. Thank you so much. All the best.